Okay. Chloe, are you going to give me a countdown?
Yes.
Okay, I'm waiting for the countdown.
3, 2, 1.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Weather School. We're going to talk about tropical systems today. We're going to talk about out-of-season tropical systems in particular. And here we are as we give this update in the month of May. We may have a May tropical system forming this coming weekend, an out-of-season and early-season tropical system. Officially, hurricane season doesn't begin until June and lasts through November. This is for the Atlantic Basin, the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean, the Atlantic Ocean. But just because most storms occur in June to November, and that's why we label that as the official season, Mother Nature doesn't care about our labeling. She has produced tropical storms in the Atlantic Basin in every calendar month of the year. May, June, July, August, September, October, November, the busy months. December, in fact, we even had one storm in the Atlantic form in December and still be active as we turned into January. So even though we label the season as June to November, we can get early or late season storms. May is the most likely out of season month. If we're going to have an out of season storm, 60% of them since 1951 have happened in the month of May. Storms have occurred in all months. Even December and January, you can have a tropical storm or a hurricane in the Atlantic Basin. This year's forecast, before we get to what's going on out there right now, for 2020, they're forecasting 16 named storms. That would be tropical storms, 8 hurricanes, 4 major hurricanes. That's Cat 3 or above. So how does that compare to last year? Last year we had 18 named storms. So if this forecast is correct, it'll be a little lower count than last year. We had 6 hurricanes. They're forecasting 8, so we'd have more actual hurricanes, 74-mile-an-hour sustained winds or higher. And then major hurricanes, last year we had 3 of them. Of course, devastating storms over the Bahamas. And then we're forecasting 4 major hurricanes for this year. So we'll have to wait and see if those storms that form actually hit land. That's what actually makes it a damaging storm. You can have 50 hurricanes, but if they stay in the open Atlantic, okay, that's good. They don't impact people. So let's look about how we track them and what may be coming here in May. What I'm looking at here is a map of the Gulf of Mexico, the Western Caribbean, and the Western Atlantic. Here's the east coast of the U.S. If we're going to get an early season storm in the Atlantic, they almost always happen here, or in the Gulf of Mexico. That's because we just get warmer here earlier in the season. The green lines, these are surface isobars, lines of equal pressure. And what we've got here is the center of an area of high pressure, and everything's rotating clockwise around that high pressure dome right now. And in fact, you can see the rain and thunder that's happening in central Texas right now as well. However, computers are suggesting that conditions may become favorable enough for a tropical cyclone to try to develop as we head into the weekend. So here's our very strong area of high pressure. But you see this little kink right here? That's a wave. That's a tropical wave. That is low pressure trying to form. Now, to actually have low pressure form, we need to have those lines curl around and close off and make what's called a closed low. So as we head into Friday, we won't have a closed low, but we will have a kink. Those are winds trying to circulate around developing low pressure. Watch what the isobars do, the lines of equal pressure. Watch what they do as we head into the weekend and early next week. And they do close off a low. And look at how tightly they're packed. So that indicates perhaps vigorous development as we head into Sunday, several hundred miles off the east coast, but nonetheless an early May tropical storm may form. And as we head into Monday, Tuesday, what there is of that is forecast to race off to the northeast. And quite often the early season storms, May, don't hit land. That's because at this point the jet stream, the upper level winds are still quite active, and they pick up and lift these storms and race them off to the east. So there are several factors that go into a system being able to develop in the first place. One of the ones that you may have heard a lot about is sea surface temperature. And so these are current sea surface temperatures right now in the area we're watching. And in general, we need to see sea surface temperatures near 80 degrees. to have enough energy to begin to form a tropical cyclone. So as we look around, off the Texas coast, it's a little cool for development. We've got temperatures here at 73 degrees. I would not expect anything to form there. But however, in the Gulf of Mexico, you see we've got 81 here in the Bay of Campeche. We've got 81 near the Yucatan Channel. We've got 83 here near the Cayman Islands. Plenty warm. And remember, this is where that kink in the winds is going to try to start forming. So it will be doing its genesis in water that is near or a little above 80 degrees. So there's plenty of energy here for it to form. And if it does move north and up the east coast, even though we're 78 here, and you can see this bright red line there, that's the warm waters of the Gulf Stream as they head up the east coast. That helps to pull warm water up here. And so the water surface temperatures, even though they're not 80, they're close enough here where, yeah, it's conceivable we could get tropical development. So think of sea surface temperature as just kind of a baseline that says, yes, there's enough heat energy to form a tropical system. You can have sea surface temperatures that reach 90 degrees. And quite often you'll hear the media say, oh, sea surface temperatures are way above normal. We're going to have an active season. That is not what that means. Just because you have sea surface temperatures that are really warm near 90 does not mean you're going to have all kinds of tropical storms forming all over the place. There is much, much more that goes into it than just sea surface temperature. But temperatures that are above 80, that's warm enough for the genesis of tropical cyclones. So that's what sea surface temperatures are doing right now. They're warm enough. There's another factor that really, as I've studied these things over the past 30, 35, 40 years, that is a much bigger factor into whether or not we're going to have tropical development. And that would be wind shear, or what the upper level winds are doing. For a storm to develop, especially when it's trying to develop in its early stages, it needs very light winds from the surface all the way up to about 50,000 feet. But especially in the middle. So what we're going to do is look at the winds at 10,000 feet. And that's because tropical systems need to form vertically, straight up and down, to get going, to get organized, and to become strong. I love this term. It says a healthy hurricane. A healthy hurricane is one that's standing straight up and down. It allows airflow to come up the middle, out the top, and it's like a car's engine. Here comes the gas. It gets burnt inside the storm, and then here's the exhaust. And if you block any of those processes, the warm, moist air coming in, the ignition, condensation, or the exhaust, outflow at the top, if you stick a banana in the tailpipe up here, it all shuts down. So the upper level wind flow and pattern is crucial, I think much more crucial than sea surface temperature. You can have sea surface temperatures of 100 degrees, but if the upper level winds are blowing, they will blow the tops off any of those developing storms and nothing will develop. This is wind shear, vertical wind shear. You can have light winds down here at the surface, but these are winds, and this is at about 10,000 feet. And you've got the winds that are tilting that storm. And when they tilt it, it disrupts the entire process. You know, next time you have the sink, let's say you're doing the dishes. You pull a plug and that water starts to drain down. If you leave it still, it'll make a beautiful little funnel. But if you stick your hand in there and move the water around, it'll break up the funnel. It won't form. That's what happens when there's wind shear. It's like sticking your hand in a funnel, and it will disturb the vortex. It will disturb the vortex. So upper level winds that are blowing too strong, wind shear, very bad for storms to develop. So we track this. Upper level wind shear. This is what it looks like right now today. And I've put the X near where we might have that storm development. So I've just kind of placed that right there. And you can see upper level winds. And these are winds at about 7,000 to 10,000 feet. This is at 750 millibars. 700 millibars. Very strong winds across the Gulf of Mexico. Nothing is going to form here. Way too much interference from the winds for any storms to get going. And right now, the upper level winds here are very strong. There's nothing going to form there today. However, watch how the upper level wind pattern changes. And again, this is part of the process that we go through every day here during hurricane season, to watch and see what the upper level winds are doing, what the mid-level winds are doing, to see if a window is going to open for possible tropical development. And lo and behold, As we go into the weekend, here we are by Sunday, look at the change in the winds at 7 to 10,000 feet. They completely slacken off right here where the computers are suggesting, aha, we might have tropical development. And so that's why, I look at computer models, but then I look at all the different pieces of the puzzle. And if they all line up, and they are here in this case, I think it's quite likely we're going to get a tropical storm forming here. If it gets a name, it would be, I believe Arthur is the next name on the list. But this would be an early season tropical storm. Weakening wind shear may allow the intensification process to take place. And I believe my next, so here's the Atlantic names for the 2020 hurricane season. Is your name on the list? If it gets a name, it'll be Arthur. And it will be, I believe, the 6th year in a row that we have had a May storm. The next name on the list would be Bertha, Cristobal, Dolly, Edouard. You may recognize some of these. Erica, I think it's every 5 or 6 years the name list repeats.
7.
Every 7 years, thank you. Every 7 years, the list of names repeats. We don't make a completely new list every year. It repeats every 7 years. If there is a really, really devastating storm, a bad storm in a particular season, that name gets retired. So last year, Dorian, which devastated the Bahamas. So 7 years from last year, you won't see the name Dorian come up again. That one will be retired for its devastation, destruction, and strength in the Bahamas last season. You may remember the devastation it did there. So Dorian, there will never be another Dorian named storm. We put that one up in the rafters. So if it gets a name, it's going to be Arthur. So what have we learned? For tropical systems to develop, we can't have mid-level wind shear or upper-level wind shear. The winds have got to slacken up, and that is what's going to happen as we head into the weekend, right where we think development might happen. The winds are going to let up. Nothing will develop down here, but there's a window for possible tropical development. You need light upper-level winds, and the other main ingredient is sea surface temperature. You need sea surface temperature to be at a minimum about 78, 79 degrees. 80 is better. But just because you have warm sea surface temperature doesn't mean you're going to get tropical development. You need the other ingredient, which would be light upper level winds. And then you need some other things to happen too. You need storms to cluster, to begin to rotate slowly. You need there to be moisture in the atmosphere. You can't have the dry air coming in from the desert. There are so many factors that go into it. And once again, if this storm can avoid that upper level wind shear and get going, it appears that it will be no threat to the United States. And we'll look at that forecast one more time. The wind shear letting up. There's the tropical system beginning to form. And if something does form here, it is forecast to then race off into the open Atlantic and hopefully dissipate before it causes any trouble. So that's a quick look at early season tropical systems, how they form, what do you need to have them form. Erica, anybody out there got a question or a shout out I need to give?
They're all scared because I told them there's going to be a quiz.
What's the minimum sea surface temperature you need for tropical development? That's your quiz. It's pass fail.
And then Johnny's got jokes. He named Dorian the Explorian.
Who was that? Johnny. All right, that's good. Yes, Dorian the Explorian. And Dorian will not be seen again, retired because of how bad of a storm it was. Okay.
Terry gave you a shout out.
Who did?
Terry.
Hey, Terry. How you doing?
Said you're the best and you're always on point.
Thank you. Thank you, Terry. We're just hanging out and having fun. Anybody else? We got just a moment before we got to dig into the weather of the day.
JB got the answer right. He said 80 degrees.
JB, 80 degrees. Nicely done. Goal.
Kathleen just missed. She said 78.
Oh, well, I'm going to, 78's going to go. I've seen him do, 78, 79. I think 78 is really like the bare minimum. I'll go with 78. You'll get a B+ for that one. Okay, team, nice to see you today. We've got some weather coming in tonight, and especially as we head into the weekend. Join us on the 411 at 4 o'clock for a complete weather update and, of course, the news of the day. We'll see you at 4 on the TV side.